Good morning. My name is Thomas McBride, as I'm sure a few of you know, and just real quick first, thank you to all the fathers for showing up on Father's Day. I know getting up early is hard, especially on your very special day, and thank you to the rest of the congregation for showing up to celebrate this monumental event. The few of you that are here just for the special high school senior joke, I wrote this at 11 p.m. last night, like a majority of the high school papers that I wrote throughout the 4 years. So I'm sure all of you can see the relation between this morning's second reading and these fine seniors that spoke or performed before me, or those that will soon follow. The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground, with God's children as the seeds in this great earth. That's an interesting note that I'll come back to in just a bit. Just recently, as an early graduation gift, my parents and grandmother decided to gift me an Apple Watch. Those of you who know me well will know that I'm quite the nerd and enjoy getting the fancy new technology that comes out every single year. But this seemed more than the regular phone update or a new computer. This was my first watch. And as I'm sure many of the gentlemen and women in this congregation can agree, the first watch one gets can often be the one he or she wears for years and years and can look back upon one day to recollect the memories of the times the watch had spun around, seemingly unaware of the life its wearer had been living. This whole watch thing turned out to be a pretty good metaphor for high school. 4 years that seemingly went on forever, but now looking back went as quick as an Olympic sprint. Teachers have ingrained in our brains that the longer we watch a clock in school, waiting for the period to be over, the slower the clock goes. I can attest to this, sitting through chemistry class, watching the second and minute hands roll by, until one day we actually got a new clock in that room. Turns out the old one was actually slow. The saying continues, though, like a pot of boiling water, keep watching the pot and it will never boil until that water hits 100 degrees Celsius and the water begins changing state from liquid to a gas, and I learned that in chemistry class. Chemistry class also taught me a bit about the chemistry of plants, and it dawned upon me yesterday when my parents and I were shopping in a nursery that gardening is really, really hard, and God bless all of you that are green thumbs and can garden. A plant needs care and water and sun and good soil and just the right temperature, and that's a lot of variables for something that just grows green things and sometimes colorful things and then goes away for like 4 months because it's cold out and we live in Buffalo. But looking at that deeper, it's very similar to what kids need and what God's children need to thrive and spread the good word and do God's work. They're the very things that teachers give us in school: good education and food. And it's what the youth groups at church give us, fantastic adult leaders that guide us along the path until we reach a point where we can go out and do good in the world. It's at this point, really briefly, that I would like to personally thank Mrs. B and Big D and TC and my confirmand partner, Mr. Barry. And of course, the Reverend for giving my fellow youth and I these things. You guys are the topsoil and the sun that gives us this much needed nurturing. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. And here we are, big and tall seniors. You know, it's many of my senior friends that commonly say they wish they could go back to freshman year, knowing everything they know now and do it all over again. And would you like to know what I say? Let me know when you find a way, because I've got a killer way to make some money. There's no possibility that anyone would think the Bills make the playoffs in 2017. No, what I would really say is that they don't know what they don't know. The care and nurturing that my friends and I have received in the community of Orchard Park and beyond is something so precious and valuable that it can and only should be experienced once, and that one time is far and away enough. The seniors in this room should know that they are some of the most prepared and rigored pupils in the country, and I mean that with full sincerity. These seniors among me are at the upper end of their class, and in addition to school, also held part-time jobs. I myself work at Manja right down the street, and I'm a waiter. I wrote about this job I have in a public speaking class earlier this year at Orchard Park. I wrote about why I thought everyone should work in the restaurant industry at least once in their lifetime. Everyone that I've ever met that has worked in the restaurant industry has agreed with me, every single one. Now that says something, but for one, it says more than 10 people have agreed on one thing, which is absolutely marvelous in my opinion. On a second note, it shows yet another avenue of humans caring for other humans. I take pride, like many other waiters and waitresses do at other restaurants, to give my guests a great meal and experience, whether you're a great tipper or not. And right now, that is my way of nurturing some of God's children, or God's seeds, if you want to use today's word. In a week's time, my way of nurturing God's children will change. I, among many other youth, will travel to Jamestown for work camp, where we will paint and hammer and clean and give our time to those in need. It's usually the first-timers on work camp that don't realize how quickly time is moving. Like my little brother Isaac, who last year had no idea that it was Wednesday already. He honestly thought it was only Monday. It hit me then that there was interesting lack of clocks anywhere on the work camp trip. Many of the workers don't wear watches because they could get dirty or could interfere with the work we do on the trip, which makes sense. I hope at this point you're starting to see how all these things are starting to come together, and it's beginning to look like that point towards the end of an Oscar-winning film where two or more seemingly separate plots begin to converge, and you see why Tom Hanks has so many Oscars. That joke was for Tom Hanks. I invited him to come listen to my sermon, but I guess he didn't show. He's probably a little busy, which is all right. My watch is now buzzing me, telling me that I've hit a specific minute marker. It's kind of small and far away, so you can't see, but trust that there's a specific minute marker I set up for this speech. That's also a metaphor if you really want to dive into this deeply. I'm making lots of metaphor quibs because a majority of my high school English experience was looking at metaphors and how they can enhance a novel or piece of literature. So I'm using metaphors in this sermon to enhance this sermon. I hope it's working. Because like the teachers and community of Orchard Park, these metaphors are the sun and the topsoil and the loving care that this sermon needed to thrive. And like the students in chemistry class, watching the clock, waiting for the bell to sound and the period to be over, and the wash pot that will eventually boil, our time has finally come as seniors to go out into the world and do the good work that God has set out for us. To do the work that our church leaders prepared us to do with God's grace. And one day in the future, hopefully when we solve climate change and world hunger and cures for incurable diseases, and a few other things, I'll be able to look back upon this watch in my garden of tomatoes and sunflowers and recollect upon the times I've spent forth putting the work to serve others, and to remember the joy of graduating high school and preaching in front of a congregation that has brought me to this point and whom I dearly love and admire for such. And I'll think to myself, I thought it was only Monday. Thank you.
I am so glad that you